Hey, so in this video we're going to be discussing the second act of the Death Note musical. As of now, I'll put a list of songs in the first and second acts just in case you were looking for a certain song analysis, and if the song you're looking for is from the first act, I'll link the video about the first act in the description. This applies to that video as well, but if you just want to skip everything else I'm saying, I'll put timestamps in the description. I'm also going to be making the assumption you've seen the first video, so I won't explain anything I already explained over there. With that out of the way, let's get started with the first song of the second act, Stalemate. The first verse is L talking to Light's father and saying he thinks Light is Kira. Anyone familiar with the series already knows L suspects Light, but I wanted to bring that up because there are 4 important participants in this song: Light, L, Misa, and Light's father. Light's father doesn't have a singing role, which implies that he's out of the loop, so to say. Light and Misa are very aware that Light is Kira, obviously, and L is very confident that Light is Kira. However, Light's father chooses to believe that his son is not Kira. So I actually didn't know what the word inoculate meant when I first listened to this, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the term is a very small, weak portion of something that is used in an effort to defend against a bigger portion. So for example, vaccines have a very small, very weak bit of a disease, and it's injected into you so that your body builds immunity without having to get sick, because it's too weak to harm you, but it's enough for your immune system to fight against it. So when Light says he inoculates himself from me, this is to say that Light is a disease, and L is trying to get into his head to figure out what he's thinking to use that against Light, which itself was obvious enough, but what I mean is the word inoculate encapsulated that. If the knowledge of that word was common and I said something a lot of people already figured out, I apologize. Another thing you might have already known is that L says that Light and him are a new atomic age, which is a reference to the atomic age, which was the point in history after the first atomic bomb testing, sort of marking a new chapter for humanity. The Death Note could be comparable to an atomic bomb in the sense that it's a weapon of mass destruction that's hardly understood by the masses, hence why I think they chose that term. So I don't recall if I mentioned this in the last video, but Light only duets with people he respects, and after he duets with L the first time, he never duets with anyone else, implying L is the only person he respects. The reason this is important is because earlier I had mentioned that Misa is also in this song as the bridge. In it, she's speaking to Light, but he never duets her, implying he doesn't respect her, which is tied in with what she says. She says he's going to love her new song. He has no response. She says she'll be his eyes. He has no response. He doesn't care about her as long as he can use her, nor does he respect her even an ounce. Light sings win or lose, and L sings lose or win, which could be a reference to how the story plays out. Once L is killed, it's believed that L lost and Light won. But at the end of the series, it's revealed that that was actually the opposite of how things ended. Metaphorically speaking, anyway. L stays dead after he dies, so he does kind of still lose, but you'll see what I mean when we get there. The next song is Mortals and Fools, and it's a duet between Rem and Misa. So if you haven't seen the anime or don't remember, it's implied that Rem is in love with Misa, or at least loves her a whole lot. In the anime and manga, it's kind of up to interpretation, but from what I've seen in the musical, it seems like it's not up to interpretation anymore. A part of this is because in the musical, Rem is a lot more upfront about the way she sees things. In the manga and anime, she was much quieter about how she felt, but as we saw with the song Only Human, Rem's character is a lot more blunt, which is probably because a quiet personality like hers doesn't mix well with the very loud and open nature of musical theater, which is why I think her feelings are more on display, because they kind of have to be. In this song, Rem is explaining the dangers of love to Misa, who is in love with Kira and trying to get into contact with him. Part of the irony of this song is that Rem is telling her that the love she feels could very well kill her. And spoiler alert for the story of Death Note, Rem dies because she loves Misa and is protecting her. The thing she says about love that she tells Misa might be her explaining how she feels about her own developing feelings for her, despite it being a warning to Misa about Kira. Rem also says, like a frog in a well who is sure he's in the ocean. And I thought that was odd because frogs don't live in the ocean. So I looked it up, and frog in a well is a phrase for somebody who's closed-minded, which is to say that Misa is letting her love for Kira get the better of her, and because of it, she's not understanding the gravity of this whole thing. Throughout the song, Rem also refers to love as a spell, which could indicate it feels unnatural to her, like some force taking over her body and making her feel like she's been tricked into feeling this way, which is how she perceives it with Misa, because those two, Misa and Kira, they're really unhealthy. But when it comes to Rem and Misa, maybe the concept of love will grow on her when she isn't looking through it in a toxic lens. There's also a rule with Shinigami that they can't save a human life, and if they do, they die. So when Rem asks Misa why love makes her break all the rules, that's more foreshadowing. When Misa and Rem both duet the "try as you might, you will not understand it" line, that could basically be to say that they don't understand the other's interpretation of love. Rem doesn't understand why Misa loves Kira because she can tell it's unhealthy, but Misa can't see that, and she thinks what she experiences is love. On the other hand, Misa tells Rem she doesn't think Rem will ever know love, which is ironic because, again, Misa is the one that Rem loves. There really is a lot of irony in the song where Rem foreshadows her death, but I don't want to beat her down Rem, so you get the point. I'll Only Love You More is the song Misa wrote as a love letter / admission to Kira. In it, she uses it to profess her love while also confessing to being the second Kira. The song is amazing because if you didn't know anything about Death Note, this would seem like a regular romance song. But if you do know about Death Note, then the lyrics really hit you because you understand what they actually mean. A lot of people have said they actually prefer the musical version of Misa because she's smarter, and this song is proof of that. She's intelligent enough to make this song seem like a romance song, but it's actually full of hints that she's the second Kira that only another holder of the Death Note would understand. Personally, I like that she's smarter. Not because I have anything against a dumber version of Misa, but making her smarter makes her more complex. In the anime, when she fell in love with Kira, it was sad, but at the same time you could tell yourself, well, she's dumb. Of course she did that. But when she's smart, and she shows us that she's smart, it makes you wonder how she can be so dumb and make such a horrible decision. Plus, it makes sense why Rem is in love with her in this iteration. In the anime, you kind of wonder what it is about Misa that makes Rem like her so much. But in the musical, Misa is everything Rem finds fascinating about humans. Rem thinks it's a shame how such smart creatures are capable of allowing their confusion with reality to cause them to make bad decisions. And isn't that exactly what Misa is? It also kind of puts a spin on how Misa sings about how Kira remakes her. She's a smart girl, she really is, but when it comes to Kira, she becomes less aware of things and really close-minded. She gives into irrational feelings despite being smart. Some instances of the hint she gives are the lyrics, "I'll gladly give you half my years," which is in reference to how getting Shinigami eyes costs half of your lifespan, and "I'll read your name and see your face," because this is how she will use the Shinigami eyes to discover who Kira is. Playing his game is another duet between Light and L that keeps up the motif of them playing a game. Throughout the musical, they both talk about their strategies as if they're trying to beat an opponent at chess rather than trying to kill or arrest the other. This also keeps up the inoculation theme of both Light and L trying to get in the other's head to beat them at their own, dare I say, game. In verse 2, Light sings, "Does he see pixels, not dreams?" And I think this is kind of a lyric that establishes how Light and L are both separating themselves from humanity. Light is trying to be a god of a new world, whereas L is trying to make himself a machine in a way. Not literally speaking, more mentally speaking. L doesn't really have morals. He's just trying to figure out the solution, and it doesn't matter how he gets it. Kind of like a computer in a way. A computer doesn't have moral standing, it just does what it's programmed to do to find the solution it's told to find. When they sing, "What if I see the world like him, like a synonym," synonym is a word that has a similar meaning to another word, going along with the idea of them trying to think very similarly to the other. Overall, a lot of the lyrics in the song basically boil down to having the same meaning, kind of like a synonym, so that's all I'm going to say about this song. One theme in Death Note is that personal endeavors can often affect morality. You'll say one thing one moment, and then something shifts, and it changes your judgment, and it creates this sort of exception. So, for example, Light says he thinks the justice system is more interested in protecting powerful people rather than protecting the innocent. That was one of his main criticisms, and something he considered unapologetically evil. But suddenly, he becomes Kira, and in an effort to prevent L and the police force from stopping him, he kills a lot of innocent people. The next song is Honor Bound, and it explores this personal battle against morality that a lot of the characters face, but here, Light's father, Soichiro, is the one who's fighting. It's a song where he questions whether Light and Kira are one and the same. In the first stanza, he says that he believes L's suspicion lies with himself rather than his son, and says he must catch Kira in order to prove that Light is exactly who he seems to be. The last line, honor bound and bound by honesty, right after saying Light is who he appears to be, might imply he believes Light would never be Kira because he's honor-bound. He can't be, because if he was, that just wouldn't be right. As you might have guessed by his song There Are Lines and this one, honor is very important to Soichiro. It's what his moral compass relies on, and it's how he sees the world. He raises light to be honor-bound, but if we're being realistic, somebody making a promise to be good doesn't make them good. It doesn't even mean they have to keep the promise. In fact, they could knowingly lie. Lying and being deceitful is very wrong, and he doesn't want to believe that despite raising his son to be a certain way, he could very well be the opposite. So that's where his dilemma arises. On one hand, he knows that a lot of evidence is pointing towards light, and the part of him that's honor-bound has to consider this. But the part of him that's a father doesn't want to. The personal endeavor affecting his morality is the question of, if light is Kira, what are you going to do about it? Can you do what you know you need to do? Or does this become the exception? Borrowed Time is the next song, and it's a Misa Amane song. This takes place when she's being tortured by Elle and the police, who are trying to get a confession that she is the second Kira out of her. It's one of those the good guys are being pretty bad moments, on account of the fact that torture is kind of bad. This is her song explaining why she will not give up a confession. And this is pretty important in any situation like this, because if a character is actively choosing to suffer more, there needs to be a pretty good reason. And boy is there. The song named Borrowed Time actually applies literally, because for all intents and purposes, Misa was supposed to be dead by now. She was destined to be dead at this point. The reason Misa got her notebook was because of a Shinigami named Jealous, who was in love with her. I mean, this girl has got to be something special if she got two gods to fall in love with her. And somehow she can't get Light to actually love her back. That sounds mean, I'm sorry. Anyways, right when Misa was destined to die, Jealous saved her life, which, as I previously said, is a death sentence for Shinigami. What happens when they do this is the person they saved gets their remaining lifetime and it kills them. So Misa is literally living on borrowed time, and she knows this. This song also does go out of its way to be very clear about the fact she's being tortured, which is apparently skimmed over in the manga. I don't know, I haven't read it. And in the anime is something you know, but is kind of more on the back burner. And we didn't get the chance to figure the same information out the same way because while she was being tortured, Light erased her memories. So her refusing to give up the information was less because of an internal motive and more because she just didn't know the information. You can try to trick me with what you're seeking, give me drugs and make me start to crack and weaken. You can tell me lies and blind my eyes. You can do your best to do your worst and get in my head, but I will hold out longer than you. These are things that are very strenuous. It's important that we get this song because the torture doesn't mean the same thing to us as the viewer if we were watching the anime, because if we were watching the anime, we'd be more focused on how Misa is losing her memory. It's horrible either way, but knowing she's holding out of devotion and personal strength and not because she thinks she isn't guilty is very, very important. I think the bridge is the part that shows us this best. I'm cheating death with every breath and every song and every sigh, with every day that I don't die is borrowed time. Yes, it was Jealous the Shinigami who gave her this time, but that itself doesn't matter to her. Whether she lives or not is simply a matter of either breathing air or being 6 feet under. The reason she is grateful for this time given is because of Kira, because being a pop idol was just a thing she did. It didn't give her a purpose. But when Kira killed her parents' killer, and she felt grateful and like she owed him, that gave her purpose. As long as she owes him, she wants to live. And betraying him would be a complete betrayal of herself, because she owes him everything. And the least she can do is give him everything she's got. So, when love comes. I actually have a lot to say about this song, and I think it's really important, not just to Rem, but the entire musical in general. Once again, Rem refers to love as a magic spell. It Can Take Your Breath Away is a lyric with an ironic meaning considering this is Rem's last song, and the end of her arc. It's a song where she explains why she's going to give up her life for Misa, because the only way for Misa to live at this point is if Rem saves her with her death note. This would kill Rem, and this song is her explaining why that's okay with her. The last 2 lines in verse 1 are, "Never believed anything could feel this true. Don't see it coming until it's standing right in front of you." So from a very shallow perspective, Rem's arc is that she started it being very fascinated, confused, and sad about love, because she thought that it was something that ruined people. It ruined Misa in a way, right? But it ends with her realizing she loves Misa and giving up her life, the exact thing she originally thought of as the sad end goal of humans. "You see things through someone else's eyes" is a line that calls back to playing his game, where Light and Elle say they'll look through his eyes to try and find a way to stop the other. Eyes in both songs are very different. I think the concept of looking through someone else's eyes is supposed to be representative of how the two interact with each other. Light and Elle are trying to stop the other, whereas Rem loves Misa and would give up her life for her. I think these two dynamics are supposed to be complementary to each other. Light and Elle are enemies, but the feelings are mutual. Rem loves Misa, but it's one-sided. And yet somehow when there's a song about love in some way, it's the only time a song in this musical is happy and content. Can't believe the peace I'm feeling, almost like it can't be real. Even if I die, love will survive. I think this lyric is very important because this line is what got me in the direction I'm going with my interpretation. Let me set the stage, so to say. So the main character arcs we've got to see so far are Light, Soichiro, Elle, Misa, and Rem. The only two that conclude as of Act 2 are Elle and Rem. First, let's talk about Light and Soichiro. Light's happiness relies on the people he believes deserve to die, dying. For that to happen, nobody can find out he's Kira. Hiding your true self from everybody you know can't be fulfilling. Soichiro's happiness relies on the Kira investigation never being solved, because it relies on Light not being Kira. These arcs rely on something else that'll make them unhappy, if not now, then in the long run. Meanwhile, with Light and Elle, they're so focused on defeating the other, they aren't doing anything else. Their characters are so defined by their rivalry, there's not much else to say about them. That's not saying they aren't complex, because they are, but their simple nature is part of that complexity. Light doesn't want to die because his purpose relies on his survival. Soichiro doesn't want to know the truth because it would make him face a horrible reality. Elle doesn't want to die because it'll mean he lost the game. Rem accepts her death. The way she felt about love in Only Human wasn't wrong. It is a shame this is how things have to end for her. But now that she feels love, she has perspective on it. Yes, it's still a shame, but she's okay with that because love is what makes life worth it, as cliche as that is. I really want to explain this point because I think it's important, so I want to go back to Where's the Justice? As I've said before, Death Note is a lot of things, but one noticeable thing is that it's a critique on personal concepts of justice. In Where's the Justice, Light is asking the question, where's the justice in the justice system? As his teacher says, all the questions and critiques he has have all been brought up before. Yet somehow, he's seeking a simple answer to a complicated situation. When you try to get those simple solutions, you get stuck in a cycle you can't break because you aren't allowing the real answer to be the answer you want. You get stuck in this loop of looking for something that isn't there. Because humans are such complicated creatures that are also problem-solving creatures, a lot of us fall into this cycle very often and more than once. Nobody is saying you can't do this, or you can't be cynical, or you can't simplify things. But it is undeniable that being in this cycle and getting lost in it isn't good. You need something to live for that makes you feel content, even if the world is burning, and even if there's no hope. Because really, the world is always burning, literally and figuratively, and there's a lot of times it's difficult to find a silver lining. Happiness is all you have. If you trade that for an attempt to solve all the problems you can't, are you really living, or are you just doing things and telling yourself it's working? Love for anything, whether that be a project or a person or a hobby, is something that gives people purpose, even when they feel like the world is ending, because all anyone can ever wish for is to appreciate the world around them when they die and to be at peace. And I think Rem was able to do that. I have a lot of feelings about this song, and I wish I felt like I could the word I'm looking for is adequately, by the way. Adequately explain all of them. I'm sorry if none of that made sense, but I hope you at least understand what I'm trying to say. Before we talk about the next two songs, I do want to discuss something. So when I first listened to the musical, I assumed they were still working on it, I guess. Like, I didn't know Act 2 was the last act. I assumed there would be a second musical or more acts or something along those lines. I've always held the belief that a good Death Note ending will always end with Light's death. With everything Light symbolizes, I think allowing his ending to be anything other than death isn't right. Which is why Elle's death being the end was not what I wanted. And I think it's an ending that leaves a lot to be desired for a lot of people. An ending being lackluster is never a surprise to me personally because as a writer, I think endings are probably one of the hardest things to write. There's so much to be said at the end of any story, but there's only so much you can say. No matter what you do, it's going to leave someone unhappy. So what I mean by this is I'm not saying this is the worst ending I've ever seen. But I do think that if there's a lot left to be desired from you, that's fair, because I feel the same way. But the more I analyzed things, the more I felt this was a perfect ending. So now that that's out of the way, let's discuss the perfect ending in question. The way it ends, the second to last song. Also, just gonna quickly say I'm not analyzing reprises, in case you haven't noticed, so sorry. I don't even know if I'm analyzing them in order, to be quite frank with you. Anyways, so, instead of ending the way it does in the anime, in the musical, it is Rem who kills Elle to save Misa, killing herself in the process. Basically, they create this scenario leading up to Elle's death. We aren't going to focus on that, though, so let's get right into the lyrics. Verse 1 is basically just Elle admitting he knows he's being controlled by some sort of force making him move a certain way, pouring tea as if he does it every day, implying he doesn't do it every day. And he doesn't know why he's doing it, but he is, and it feels right. Like he's acting in a play and hitting all his marks. The chorus is him admitting he knows he's going to die. He knows Kira can control people's actions before death, and why else would he be acting out of character in a way he can't stop? He feels stupid for not realizing this was how it all ended. Out of character, but somehow not a shock, makes me think of the other Death Note adaptations. This isn't exactly how things ended in the other versions, but somehow this ending does feel right. It's not the ending we all know, but something about the tone of the song and everything they're saying just makes it feel correct. Like this is how it's going to end anyway, despite knowing it's not the ending I recognize. Light's verse is him telling Elle he knows everything now. I've won the game but never gave up half my years. Almost feels like a dig at Misa. He couldn't have done any of this without her, but she made the deal and he didn't. He would have needed it somehow, some way. I've always stayed a step ahead, but you were with me all the way. Feels nostalgic to me. When I was a kid, I used to play soccer, and after every game, they made everybody say good game to each other, and it kind of gives me the same feeling as that. Like I wanted to win the entire time, but I still appreciated that the other team was there, giving me something to fight against. I imagine that's how Light feels too. The whole song sounds bittersweet. We know this is bad, but it feels like everything is going to be okay. Solemn, but a sense of closure where there is none. The tone of this song is one I don't think can be described in words very accurately because it all feels so opposing. But I think that was intentional. In order to explain why I think it's intentional, let's discuss the final song of the Death Note musical, Requiem. Requiem is a complimentary song in the way I think it's kind of the same vibe as the last song, but it's more vague on purpose. The way it ends was blunt, and it told you exactly what happened. Both Requiem, we don't even know who it's a requiem for. A requiem is a song played in honor of the dead. You could say it's Elle, but it could also be Rem, or any of Light's victims, or everyone who has ever died, or will die. I think the way it ends was a song meant to give closure to the story being told, and end the conflict. But Requiem represents the theme and the message, a purely metaphorical song outside of the story itself. Sleep now, here among your choices, then drift away. I think this is supposed to represent death itself. Not the before or the after, but the experience. To take your last breath, open your eyes one last time, knowing there's nothing left for you to do except think about how you got here one last time before it's over. What happens after death isn't important in the series, which is very unique for a series that tackles the concept of death as a main focus. It focuses purely on the living aspect. In Only Human, Ryuk says he doesn't care what happens after death, and maybe that means we shouldn't either. At least in the context of this story. People can tell stories about coming back to life after a nearly fatal accident or being revived, but no matter what those people say, there will always be skepticism. There are so many religions that ask what happens after, but not a single answer has been able to quell the question in every last person on Earth. It's a question that has an answer, but it's very different from other questions in the way we will never have a definitive answer. It's as natural as gravity, but not as simple as calculus. Something very unique about death is the life that comes before it. When you're born, you're destined to die. Not because you don't deserve to live, but because you live. Everything that begins has an end. Once you begin, you will eventually end. Whether that ending is the final end for you and everybody else doesn't matter, because whatever happens, if anything happens, is a new chapter that can only begin if the former closes. You can never live your life again after you die, which is why the choices you make are important. Each action has an effect. There's this idea that you can always do whatever you want, but that's not true. Every choice you make kind of locks your path forward. Whatever choice you make, you have to live with it, whether that means dealing with the consequences or figuring out how to go back. Gone who was right or wrong, who was weak or strong, nothing left to learn. A funny thing about people is that we really do make the same mistakes over and over again. The phrase history repeats itself is true because if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. but there's some things you can only learn from experience. Because of this, humanity is stuck in a loop of always making the same mistakes over and over until someone learns, and then someone forgets, and then the loop continues. We see it in politics all the time, and in the justice system. This system is corrupt, somebody fixes it, another corrupt person comes along and damages it, the cycle continues. This is all to say that we truly are the descendants of our ancestors because we just live the same lives in different fonts. We'll make the mistakes forgotten along the way, and we'll create lessons created not so long ago. I know this seems cynical and maybe even nihilistic to say that what we do will one day be worth nothing. When a war is fought and a side loses, it feels stupid. Like, what was the point if they were going to lose anyway, right? What's the point of light being perceived as evil and corrupt when he won? Feel every gentle breeze whisper through the trees as the seasons turn. This lyric is saying that everything we ever experience is a fleeting experience. I'm a senior in high school right now, but I won't always be a senior in high school. You're watching this video, but you won't always be watching it. You could take this lyric as proof that nothing you do matters, or you can take it as everything will be okay. I think this line is in reference to Light using the Death Note. When he has it, it's scary, and if I were in that world, I'd think everything was doomed. But he's only human, despite what he thinks. He doesn't see that he'll always be human. One day, he'll die, and the world will become something without him. He was only a very gentle breeze in the grand scheme of everything that will ever happen. There will be a new season, and when that new season comes, there will be different problems with different solutions. As big of a deal as Kira is now, soon he'll only be something that happened a very long time ago. Souls sing their oratory, fading west as they fly, might be to say that every soul, every person has a unique story to them, even if they will eventually fly west, which I believe is a reference to how the sun sets in the west, the end of the day, the end of a life. Stories old as the word goodbye could mean that this song of good versus evil, which is really morally gray versus morally gray, is a very old concept. Very old because it's just how everything works. Morality clashes and conflicts far more often than it collides. With every morally wrong act, it has a morally correct reason. With every morally right act, it has a morally wrong reason. I think the themes of this song and this musical is that it's not wrong to want to change things. But calling back to only humanity will always be humanity. We can't change that. Our descendants will face the same problems we face now, just as we face the problems our ancestors faced. They may not look the same, but it'll look too familiar for our tastes. It seems cynical, but there is a silver lining. Rather than devote your life to try to fix every problem you can't fix, you should be more like Rem. Realize when things are beyond your control and find peace in whatever you can do and beauty in what you have. Loving Misa may not have changed the world, and it wasn't the focus of the story. But out of everyone, who do you think really had a happy ending? The characters trying to create a new world and become gods and machines? Or the god who learned to love before doing the most human thing anyone could do and die for it? So that was the end of the video. I hope you loved it. My throat really hurts from recording all these lines, but that's okay. I'm probably going to look up fan art of Rem because I think I might be her biggest fan. I don't usually post Death Note stuff, but if you like my analysis, I love talking about symbolism. It's literally all I do, and if you love it, you'll love it here. Maybe. I'm not going to promise that, actually. Anyways, leave a like or dislike, whichever you fancy. Subscribe if you want to see more, and with that, have an amazing day.